Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Ways of the World, where we focus upon a different country and culture and discover the different ways of the world through the lenses of Villanova students and faculty. These Villanovans have studied abroad and are here to share their experiences. I'm your host, Ava Petrosky. Today, we are exploring Spain. Joining us today is Villanova University junior Rob Vagnini, who spent his summer in Cádiz, Spain. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Tell me, how was Spain?
It's hard to put it in words. It was honestly one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. I was only there for about 6 weeks. The program itself was about 5 weeks. And then I was there a week ahead of time with just my family. But it was honestly life-changing. I learned so much about the culture. I was able to immerse myself in the culture really well. And I just had some really, really fun memories there.
So before we talk about the program, where did you travel and for how long with your family before it?
So let's see. So I started, so the semester ended at the middle of May. I came back from finals. I had a couple days of a break, and I think it was like May 14th or 15th, I went right into Spain. So not too much time of like summer beforehand. But right when I got to Spain, we went to Barcelona for 2 days. And then from Barcelona, we went to Mallorca, which is a little island off of like coast of Spain, more towards the east side. And then from there, we flew into Madrid. We were there for a day, and then I met up with the rest of the program in Madrid as well the day after.
So now tell me about the program.
So the program was awesome. I am so happy that when I was there, we got to experience a bunch of different places. So like you said, our program was concentrated in Cádiz, Spain. So that's more of a native town. It's a beach town along the southern coast of Spain. But there's so many other places in Spain, so many big cities that I had heard of. And so that was one of the things I was a little bit worried about going into the program, was whether I would have a chance to be able to experience all the other different cities and these huge events that everybody was talking about. And I think that that was something that was super cool about the program, was the ability for us to be able to travel around, to experience all these different parts of Spain. So we had a lot of side quests throughout. And I think that that was super helpful to just kind of learn even more about the community, to learn more about the culture there, because you even find that from city to city, from place to place in Spain, it's super different. So
yeah. What's your favorite city that you traveled to in Spain?
It's a great question. Honestly, I'm kind of biased, and I would probably say Cádiz, just because I spent so much time there. And I just loved the dynamic between it being a city, but also having that sort of town feel. It wasn't too overwhelming. But there were some city aspects. You're able to walk around, a lot of restaurants to eat. It was right by the beach, which was perfect. But aside from Cádiz, I'd probably say Sevilla was probably my next favorite. Definitely one of the bigger cities, but I just felt like there was so much to do. And it was also one of the first places that we traveled before arriving to Cádiz. And so I was able to kind of experience that city life, that city culture kind of right off the bat. And I think that that was super special.
So you started in Madrid and then you had gone to Sevilla before Cádiz. Where else in Spain did you travel?
Yeah, so we started in Madrid. We were there for just, I believe, like a day, maybe 2 days. And then right from there, we went to Toledo. We went there for a day. It was just a day trip. We stayed overnight. And then the day after, we went to Sevilla. Same sort of idea. We stayed there for a day. And then from there, we went to Cádiz. And then we also had a bunch of weekends throughout Spain, or throughout our trip in Spain, where we were able to kind of explore and travel about. So we also went to Granada one weekend. We went to Tarifa, which is the southernmost part of Spain. And I like to say I saw Morocco from there, but I couldn't. It was too foggy. But I'm telling all my family members that I have seen Morocco, which is cool.
Perfect.
And so, yeah, super cool. We were able to do a lot of different side quests. And then we also even had like a free weekend one of the weekends towards the end where you could really go anywhere. And so some members of our group, they went to Portugal. And then me and 5 others, we went to Bordeaux in France, which was also like a dream of mine to go to France ever since I was young. So that was just a really cool experience. Very different culture there as well. And as soon as I finally got familiar with using Spanish, we went to Spain and they don't speak Spanish there. So I kind of had to adjust and adapt there, but I thought that that was super cool.
Did you find that anyone in France spoke Spanish or was it more English?
Definitely more English, which was also kind of surprising to me. I was fully expecting to have to pull out some sort of Google Translate to figure out how to speak French, but a lot of the people there spoke English, which was really nice. We were kind of so used to using Spanish that oftentimes we would just start out by saying "hola" or something, and then they would look at us funny. But yeah, for the most part, everybody spoke English there, which is really nice.
Awesome. So, how did you decide to go to Bordeaux in the first place?
So we were kind of bouncing around a few ideas. The year before us, they had gone to Portugal during their free weekend, and then they also went to Morocco a different weekend. And so we had some options. We were kind of debating whether we wanted to do something like that. Spain is, since it's like right in the middle of Portugal and France, we were kind of debating something close, something that would be pretty cheap, but also something that probably would give us a different experience from what we were used to. And we found that there were a lot of similarities between Portugal and Spain. And so we wanted to kind of try something like completely different and branch off into France. And so, yeah, Bordeaux was kind of one of those cities that flights there weren't too expensive. And it was also like, just there was a lot to do from everything that we looked up. There was definitely like a lot of different options to kind of explore, things to see. And so it seemed like a really cool place that wouldn't be super touristy, but also kind of give you that cultural immersion.
What was your favorite French dish that you ate?
So there were so many good French dishes. Let's see. I'd have to say that there was this one dish I had at one of the restaurants, and it was super interesting. It was like a pita with tomatoes. It was sort of like a breakfast dish. I'm not too sure exactly what the name of it was, but it was so good. And it had like a bunch of different spices in there. And it was super different from what I was used to. It almost had kind of like a Mediterranean feel to it. But it was like a staple there and just super good. Yeah, very different from anything I'd ever had, but I still think about it today. So.
Pretty influential. So now tell me more about the academic program that you had in Spain. What did you study?
Yeah. So I am a Spanish minor, and so I kind of went into college knowing that I wanted to study Spanish. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a major or minor, but I definitely wanted to start out, since both the major and minor have the same core classes to start off with. I knew that I just wanted to finish that and kind of see where it would take me. So through Villanova, you're required to take an upper level elective and then an upper level Spanish. And so, like just any Spanish class. And so when I was there, I took 2 courses. One of them was about the literature of Spain. And so it was a little difficult because pretty much the entire class was run fully in Spanish. And the professor was a professor from the University of Cádiz, which is where we took classes. And so the entire class was in Spanish. And we were reading some older text from like the 1800s that were written in all Spanish. And we had to kind of analyze it, which was definitely super difficult. I always like to compare it. This is probably not the best comparison, but I always like to say that it's almost as if a non-native English speaker came to the U.S. and had to analyze Shakespeare. That's just
that
how it
would
felt
be
like
so
to me.
challenging. So challenging.
It was pretty tough. Super interesting though, and I learned a lot, and I feel like my reading comprehension, writing comprehension just improved a lot. Mm-hmm. And then our other class was an intro to Spanish translation, so kind of learning the tools and some of the basic essentials to becoming a translator between English and Spanish. And so super useful, and you kind of learn a little bit more about the slang and kind of the normal like prose and verse that you use in conversation when you're in Spanish-speaking countries, the differences between different Spanish-speaking countries. So definitely super useful, and I was able to apply some of that stuff even when I was in Spain. So.
Was that another University of Cádiz professor?
So that actually was one of the professors at Villanova. She was our advisor for the program, and then she came down to, she taught the course as well as kind of led some of the other activities while we were down there.
How do you see your Spanish proficiency increased throughout the program? Did you see a big change?
So definitely. I always kind of considered myself pretty proficient, I would say, going in. I have taken Spanish classes ever since I was in 6th grade. those were like hola, like necesito usar el baño, something like that. But like the basic phrases. And then as I kind of went through all my Spanish courses, rest of middle school and into high school, it's a lot of memorization. And I feel like a lot of it's just rote memorization, learning vocab words, learning grammar structures. And so it wasn't super interesting to me. I feel like I was able to memorize a lot of things right from the onset, but I wasn't able to actually apply the language. That was until my senior year of high school. I took my AP Spanish class, and my professor was just incredible. Super awesome teacher. She was able to kind of immerse us in that Spanish culture by telling us more about like how we can use the language in ways other than just memorization. And so I found that I was able to apply the language there, which I think was just super helpful to just being able to understand how it works more. We learned more about Spanish culture, and it was almost like an English class just taught in Spanish, which I think was what I needed with the Spanish in order to be able to kind of understand it and take it in better. So when I went to college, I was kind of expecting that. It was a little bit more of that like rote memorization from the bat, like for that proficiency. But following that, once I started to get into my Spanish minor courses, I found that it was just courses that could be taught in English, but they were taught in Spanish. And so you really are forced to use the language right from the onset. And I found that when I went to Spain, using the language in those classes just helped incredibly. So not only did I find that in school, I was able to kind of use the language super often. But I also, just in the culture, because the place that we were at in Cádiz is such a native town, there weren't a ton of English speakers there. So you kind of were forced to use the language in real life situations. And so when we were going out to dinner, or if we were grabbing a cup of coffee or going to the beach and you had to conversate with other people there, you were forced to use the language because there wasn't really any other way. And so I think that helped us, like being put in situations where you have to think on your feet. I think that was super helpful. And so kind of the combination of those two really definitely increased my proficiency in Spanish.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
Spanish is a great tool to have.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's become so applicable too. Like, just in encounters nowadays, like if I ever encounter somebody who's a non-native English speaker but speaks Spanish, it's just so much easier. And I have so much more confidence, I feel like, to approach that conversation. So,
what were your living arrangements in Cádiz?
So that's a great question. I was in a host family when I was there. And so I lived with one other roommate, and then we were in a house in like an apartment complex. There was a father, a mother, and then they had 3 children. One of them also lived with us. They were all older. The son was, I believe, in his 30s, and he had a girlfriend at the house, and they just had a kid. So super interesting living arrangement. There were 5 of them total, but they were so awesome. They were kind of in charge and responsible for basic like living arrangements, so laundry, things like that, eating arrangements. So they would cook us breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, and so that was super cool, being able to just learn a lot from them, people that live in Spain full time, that have grown up in Spain. Because it's one thing when you're in school learning from a professor about what Spain life is like, but it's another to actually be in a living arrangement to actually learn from people who have lived there all their lives. And so I think that was something that was super special, was just having that contact, that close contact with Spain natives. They were also just fantastic people. They owned a bar, which was super close by. And so they always invited us down there, and just super lively down there. And they gave us recommendations for places to go. They asked about us and our life back in the United States, and we kind of did the same for them. And so it was just super cool, the way in which we were able to interact and use that language, and once again, like a real life, on the spot sort of situation.
What was the hardest part about assimilating to not only going to Spain and taking classes there, but then living in a Spanish home?
I would say that using the language in a way that's so different from how I've ever used it before, that was definitely one of the hardest things. You learn all these words, and when you're sitting at the dinner table and they're asking you about U.S. politics, and you're trying to come up with the right words to describe it, it's just so hard to think on the spot. And so find that with that, you rely a lot on the other people that you're with, and you kind of build up the confidence over time. But from in the very beginning, it was super, super difficult. Even to just like approach and be like, hey, what are we having for dinner? Sometimes it could be like nerve-wracking to even just make that initial conversation. I remember in the very beginning, I would sit in my bed and just like develop ideas for what I wanted to ask them. And I would come up with a really good question. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna ask them like what their favorite food to eat is in Spain, for example. And then I'd go up to them and I'd ask them, and I was so happy that I like nailed it. And then they would understand, they would give me an answer back. I had no idea what they said. And then I would sit there blank and just be like, okay, like adios. And so definitely from the very beginning, it was very difficult. But the assimilation, I think, kind of takes a little bit of time. And there's something beautiful about that as well, is you kind of learn the ins and outs of the language, the ins and outs of the culture as time goes on. And the other thing is every single place in Spain, every single place in the world has its own set of customs, its own set of slang and just ways of living. And so you kind of learn about the way of Cádiz. When we were there, we learned so much about just how the people in Cádiz live, what they're used to, the different words that they say. And so that a lot of that is just being confident, being able to ask the people around you and being open to learning. I think that took a little bit of time from the beginning, but as we progressed in our experience there, it became a little bit easier.
Definitely. Walk me through a day in your life.
So we had classes Monday and Friday, or Monday through Friday. We had 2 classes a day. So those 2 classes that I mentioned before, we had 2-hour blocks for each of those classes every day. And so I believe our first class started at 9, and that would run to 11, and then we'd have about a 30-minute break for lunch, and then from there we would go to our next class for 2 hours. So we would get up probably around like 8:15ish. Usually our host mom would leave out some sort of like bread and jam, something super small for breakfast. We'd help ourselves, me and my roommate, and then we would go walk to class, which is about a 15-minute walk. The nice thing was that everybody in our program, everybody's host families lived somewhat close to the school. We were definitely one of the longer walks, but even 15 minutes isn't too bad. And so it was also nice because our view circled around the beach. And so we got to have like a really nice morning view every morning.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It was awesome. It was so cool. There were times where I would be walking to class and be like, there's no way this is real. But we would go to class. And then usually that 30-minute break, I would be so hungry. The like 2 pieces of bread in the morning didn't really carry over well. So I was just so hungry. And I would always get this sandwich. It was like a bacon, egg, and cheese, but they're so good there. It's very different from any like bacon, egg, and cheese I've ever had here. But it was like a baguette, and they would have like this really like good quality ham, and it was so fantastic. And so I had that. I think I had that every single day. Usually a cappuccino alongside that. And then I'd go to my second class. We would end the day, I think around like 1:30 or 2. And then we would walk back to our host families or the apartments. And usually we would take like about a 30-minute to an hour little break. So in Spain, they have this thing called siesta, which is usually around 3-ish. Mm-hmm. And it's a short time of the day where most of the restaurants close, most of like the places around town close, and everybody usually just takes a nap. The thing I find there is that nobody sleeps. Like I feel like the sleeping hours are so limited. They stay up super late and they wake up super early. And so the siesta I learned was super necessary. And so usually little siesta, just lay in bed for a little bit. And then my host family would always have La Ruleta de la Suerte, which is Wheel of Fortune, but in Spanish. And so me and my roommate would play along with them. We never have any idea what any of the things were, but we just thought it would be fun to play.
It was a board game?
It was a TV program. And so they'd put it on TV. They would all get so excited. They all would gather around the TV. They're like, I know it. I was like, I have no idea what any of these words mean. But yeah, I tried to play along and then I'd be so wrong. And then we would have lunch around 3:30, which that was another weird thing. Like something very different from what I was used to is the eating times were so different there. Breakfast usually at like 8 or 9. And then aside from my little cafeteria sandwich that I'd have every day. The traditional lunchtime is around 3 o'clock. And so we'd have lunch, and then usually after that, maybe go to the gym, or we would go to the beach with some of our other friends. We'd stay out late, maybe go to the sunset, come back, do some homework. And then usually at night, maybe we would go to get a little ice cream or something close by. Usually we love to just meet up and walk around town. The weather was perfect there at night, and so that was just something that we just took advantage of a lot. But and then the weekends were great. We had a lot of different side travels and side quests that we went on, and so that took up like the majority of our weekends. But those days that we had free, we would just kind of explore the city more, which I think was super special.
What's your favorite meal that you've had?
They have this one dish there, and it is sort of like, it's hard to describe, but it's an egg and potato dish, and it's served in like a circular pan, and you cut it up almost like a pie, and it's fantastic. It's just so good. And so that we would have that pretty often. And then we'd also, I think that was called tortilla española, but I could be wrong. So we had that pretty often. And the way my host family, they were fantastic chefs too. So every time they made it, we were always just so excited because it was always fantastic. There was another dish too that I remember that I think was maybe unique to my host family, but they have this dish there called gambas, which are like bigger sized shrimp, and they would fry it in like a beer battered sauce and serve it with like a dipping sauce, and it was just so good. And so it was like a special day if you would ever make that. But me and my roommate, we would always rave about it, and so try to convince him to make it again. But yeah, those are probably top two.
That's amazing. Did you partake in any other cultural experiences? Because I know Spain has such a unique and interesting culture.
Yeah. So that was, I think, one of the best things about the program was the ability for us to experience the different aspects of the culture. So one of the things we did a little bit earlier on, we had a paella cooking class. So the entire class went, and we all shared a journey of creating paella together. Definitely a staple dish in Spain. And so that was super awesome. Just kind of seeing different ways that go into that, different ingredients that go into it, and thinking that you could do that on your own, and then trying it on your own and realizing you can't. But I think there was something super special about the bonding that we had just with that experience. We also went to a flamenco dance, which was super cool. That was held inside of a cave. It was underground, and it was super crowded in there. There wasn't a ton of space, but just super interesting. I remember I wanted to film part of it, and as I went to film, my flash was on, and that's like a huge no-no when you're down there. And so everybody looked at me. It was really embarrassing, but so I wish I had more pictures, more videos about that. But that was definitely super cool to see. Super cool to see live and just kind of experience one of the like main cultural dances that exists in Spain. So those were like some of those major cultural events. That's the thing, is like the program was just so good about giving us exposure to the different sort of events and activities that you can do in Spain. And so super grateful for all of that.
Yeah. So if you were asked to make a film about Cádiz, what are some absolutes that have to be included in the trailer?
So I am a huge music buff. I love listening to music. And when we were abroad, I am a huge Billie Eilish fan. I like love Billie Eilish. It's not like a super old thing for me. Like, this is definitely more recent and more recent months. But she came out with a new album right when we left for abroad, and I put everybody on this album. I'm telling everybody about this album, and I just made sure everybody listened to it. I would play songs one by one, ask them to rate it, and so one of my favorite memories is we were on the beach really late at night, and I think it was maybe like 2 or 3 a.m. It was super early in the morning, and I'm pretty sure we had class the next day, but when you're in Spain, none of that matters, I guess. And we were coming back super late one night, and I remember I brought my speaker, And I just remember blaring one of Billie Eilish's new songs and just dancing in the streets of Cádiz with everybody else. And it was just so incredible because I felt like I was like on top of the world. I just, like, it gave me so much perspective, I think. And that's one of the best things about studying abroad is I almost like felt like I was living in a bubble, like growing up. I lived in a suburban town growing up, which was pretty much like everything you can think of in a suburban town. I had a supermarket and a movie theater and places to go eat. But I felt like I was almost like trapped in that sort of bubble. And then going to Villanova, once I was here for a little bit, I started to get acclimated to that environment as well. And I think it took me going abroad to realize that there's a whole other world out there. And you can truly feel like yourself and on top of the world and free. And I think that that's just one of my favorite memories is just, there's actually this specific video I'm thinking of us just dancing in the middle of the street, which is just super cool. Probably not the safest option, but that's definitely probably last clip, first clip in that trailer, but definitely one of my favorite memories.
Oh, that would be a good trailer. I would go. So do you have any advice for anyone who might be planning to travel to Spain or they're not sure if they should buy that ticket to go to Spain? What advice would you give?
This is super cliche. I'm a huge YOLO guy, so like definitely love the idea of like only living once and kind of taking everything as it is and being able to explore other options, being able to kind of open yourself up to the possibilities of the world. My biggest thing that I keep saying is everything's like for the memories. Like you're only going to be able to do this once, and I think that was something super special about studying abroad is the opportunity's there and it's waiting for you, and you have the decision to take it or not. And I promise that all those people that study abroad, it'll give you such a huge perspective on the world and kind of on your own identity in the world as well. I think it's so hard for me to think back to abroad because it just makes me sad that it's over. And that I think is something special, is the idea that now that it's gone, I miss it. And something that I feel with so many different memories here at Villanova in general is once they're gone, you're never going to get them back. And so taking advantage of those opportunities as they come, I think is just super important. And so that's my biggest advice, is to seize those opportunities and take advantage of the possibilities at your hands. I always think about how years from now, when I'm looking back at college, will I regret like not saying yes? Will I regret like doing this instead of this? And having that perspective to think like school is super important and this is super important to me and this is super important to me, and being able to kind of prioritize your life and realize, okay, well, having fun is super important to me and school is super important to me. Like, let's intersect the two and go abroad. Like, that is something that is super special, and it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of confidence, and the fact that like you have confidence in the fact that it's going to be incredible. It's going to be an incredible experience, but taking that leap and trusting the process and trusting that everything's going to work out. I think that that's definitely one of the hardest things, but it's also one of the most rewarding. So my biggest advice, definitely go. I mean, I can't say enough good things about Spain. There's so many possibilities. In my experience, it's one of many. And so I had a great experience, and I wish I could go back, and I wish I could seize those opportunities again. But for all those that are considering it, I think that trusting yourself, trusting that like you'll be able to look back on that experience and be so proud of the decision that you made, and have memories that will last a lifetime. I think that that's the best thing that you could think of. So yeah, definitely go.
Rob, thank you so much for sharing your advice and for sharing your experience about Spain. It sounds absolutely incredible, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for tuning in to today's segment of The Ways of the World. I'm Ava Petrosky. We'll see you next time.